Right now, at this very moment, something is happening inside your skull that you cannot feel, cannot see, and most likely have never been told about. Tiny connections between your brain cells are quietly fraying. Microscopic debris is building up in the spaces between neurons, piling higher and higher like trash that nobody ever bothered to collect. Proteins that should be swept away are instead settling in, accumulating over months and years. And here is the most unsettling part of all. You will not feel a single thing. Not today, not this week, maybe not even this year. But one ordinary morning, you will walk into your kitchen, open a cabinet, and just stand there, completely blank. You will stare at the shelves and feel a strange, hollow pause where a thought used to be. And in that moment, a quiet fear will rise in your chest, a fear that something important has already begun to slip away. Most people blame that moment entirely on age. They shrug and say, well, that's just what happens when you get older. But here is what the science actually tells us, and what most people are never shown. That pause, that blank, unsettling moment, is often not the beginning of something irreversible. In many cases, it reflects subtle changes that have been developing quietly in the background, changes that are connected not to some inevitable fate, but to something far more specific, far more actionable. Your brain has been running a night shift every single night while you sleep, and the quality of that shift depends enormously on what you give it to work with. When the right materials are missing, the night shift still shows up, but it cannot do the job properly. And that gap, repeated night after night over years, is what eventually shows up in your kitchen doorway as that hollow, frightening pause. Here is what brings real hope to this conversation. Your brain is not passively fading. It is not some fragile, fixed structure slowly crumbling under the weight of time. It is a living, dynamic organ with a remarkable built-in repair system that activates every single night when you enter deep sleep. During this critical window, your brain switches into what researchers have come to call maintenance mode. It works to clear away metabolic waste that accumulated throughout the day. It repairs neurons that have been under stress. It reinforces and strengthens the synaptic connections that hold your memories, your language, your sense of self, all of that firmly in place. This process is not a metaphor or a wellness concept. It is real, documented, carefully studied physiology that neuroscientists have been uncovering with increasing precision over the last 2 decades. But here is where things get complicated, and where most conversations about brain health fall short. After the age of 60, this repair system does not work as efficiently on its own. It needs raw materials, specific nutrients, precise biological compounds that allow the brain's night crew to actually do the work it was designed to do. And many older adults, even those who eat reasonably well, even those who take a daily multivitamin, may not be giving their brains the exact building blocks required for optimal nighttime repair. When those building blocks are missing, the brain's maintenance crew shows up for the shift, ready to work, but without the tools. And without the tools, the work either gets done poorly or doesn't get done at all. Night after night, year after year, that deficit quietly accumulates. What this means, and this is something I want you to really sit with, is that what you eat in the evening is not just about calories or feeling full or following some general dietary guideline. It can directly influence whether your brain has everything it needs to repair and rebuild tonight, or whether it continues to struggle quietly in the dark. The window between your last meal and the time you fall into deep sleep is not nutritionally neutral. It is a preparation window, a chance to give your brain what it needs before the most important biological work of the day begins. This is not theory, this is biology, and understanding it changes how you think about every meal you eat after 4 o'clock in the afternoon. My name is Dr. Emily Carter, and for more than 20 years, I have worked closely and personally with older adults who want to do something meaningful about their brain health, not just slow the decline, but actively support the systems that protect memory, preserve independence, and maintain the kind of mental clarity that lets you feel like yourself as the years go on. I have sat across from hundreds of patients who were frightened, who felt powerless, who assumed that forgetting a name or losing a thought was simply their fate. And what I have witnessed again and again is that when people understand how their brain actually works at night and align their evening habits accordingly, something shifts. Not dramatically, not overnight, but steadily, meaningfully, in ways that matter deeply to daily life. In today's conversation, we are going to talk about 5 specific whole foods, foods you can find in almost any grocery store, foods that are practical and affordable and easy to prepare, that may help support brain cell health and memory function while you sleep. Each one plays a distinct and biologically meaningful role in the brain's overnight repair process, and together they form something more powerful than any single ingredient could on its own. If you are over 60, or if you are caring for someone who is, I want you to stay with me through this entire conversation, because what we are going to cover could genuinely change how you think about the most overlooked hours of your day. Let us begin with the first food on our list. And I want to be clear, while you have almost certainly heard that this food is good for the brain, the real reason why is far more specific and far more powerful than you may have been told. That food is wild salmon. Not farmed, not just any fish, wild-caught salmon, particularly varieties like sockeye. And the reason it matters begins not with a general idea about healthy fats, but with something incredibly precise, a compound called DHA, a specific omega-3 fatty acid that is not simply beneficial to the brain, it is structurally part of it. Every single thought you have, every name you remember, every memory you hold, every connection between ideas that fires in an instant, all of it depends on signals traveling smoothly and efficiently between neurons. And those signals must pass through delicate membranes. The quality of those membranes, how flexible they are, how intact, how fluid, determines how clearly and how quickly communication between neurons can actually occur. DHA is one of the most important structural components of those membranes. It makes up a significant portion of the brain's outer cortex, and it keeps cell walls flexible, resilient, and responsive. That flexibility is not a minor detail. It is essential, particularly during the deep stages of sleep, when your brain is doing the heaviest work of consolidating memories and strengthening synaptic connections. When membranes become rigid, when they are poorly maintained due to a lack of structural fats, that consolidation process is compromised. The signals become less efficient, the connections less stable, and over time, that has consequences you eventually feel. Wild salmon provides DHA in what researchers call a pre-formed state, meaning the body does not have to convert it from another source. It can be used immediately. This matters enormously after 60 because the body's ability to convert plant-based omega-3s into usable DHA becomes significantly less efficient with age. Plant sources are valuable, but they are not the same, and the distinction is not trivial. But wild salmon goes further than DHA alone, and this is where it becomes genuinely remarkable. It is one of the richest natural sources of a compound called astaxanthin, the antioxidant responsible for its deep, vibrant pink color. Astaxanthin is unusual in a way that most antioxidants simply are not. It can cross the blood-brain barrier. This is a critically important distinction. Many antioxidants, despite their benefits elsewhere in the body, cannot actually penetrate the barrier that protects brain tissue. Astaxanthin can. And once inside, it goes to work protecting those fragile brain cell membranes from oxidative stress, particularly during the nighttime hours, when repair activity intensifies and free radicals are naturally generated as a byproduct of that very repair process. And beyond astaxanthin, wild salmon also provides highly bioavailable vitamin B12, a nutrient that becomes increasingly harder for the body to absorb properly after 60. B12 is critical for maintaining myelin, the protective sheath that wraps around nerve fibers, the way insulation wraps around electrical wiring. When that insulation is intact, signals travel quickly and clearly. When it weakens or degrades, processing speed slows, and mental clarity can begin to suffer in ways that are subtle at first, but accumulate over time. For many older adults, enjoying wild-caught salmon 2 to 3 times per week, especially as part of the evening meal, is one of the most practical and impactful decisions they can make for their brain's nightly repair cycle. Now, even the most dedicated construction crew in the world cannot get their work done if the lights never come on and the schedule keeps shifting. And that brings us to the second food on our list, one that does not rebuild brain cells directly, but determines whether the brain's repair shift actually begins on time at the right depth in the right stage of sleep. That food is tart cherries, specifically the Montmorency variety. If wild salmon provides the structural building materials, tart cherries act as the signal that turns the lights on at the construction site and sets the night schedule in motion. After 60, one of the most common changes I see in my patients is not just forgetfulness. It is sleep that has become fragmented and unreliable. Difficulty falling asleep, waking up at 2 or 3 in the morning with a restless, alert mind. Sleep that never quite feels deep or fully restorative, no matter how many hours are spent in bed. And this is not a minor inconvenience. Without deep, uninterrupted sleep, the brain's cleaning and consolidation systems simply cannot function at full capacity. They need the deep stages. They need the slow wave phases, and tart cherries support access to exactly those stages. Tart cherries are one of the very few natural food sources of melatonin, the hormone that regulates your body's circadian rhythm. And melatonin's role goes deeper than simply making you feel drowsy. It helps signal the body to transition into the deeper stages of sleep, particularly slow-wave sleep, which is the phase most closely associated with the clearance of metabolic waste from the brain and the consolidation of long-term memories. As we age, the brain's natural production of melatonin declines. This is not a disease or a disorder, it's a normal biological shift. But the result of that shift is that many older adults spend less and less time in the very stages of sleep that the brain most depends on for its nightly work. Tart cherries offer a gentle, food-based way to support melatonin levels without the grogginess that sometimes follows higher-dose supplements. They deliver melatonin naturally, in amounts the body can work with rather than be overwhelmed by. Beyond melatonin, tart cherries are rich in anthocyanins, the deep red pigments that give them their distinctive color and act as powerful anti-inflammatory compounds within the body. This matters deeply for brain health because chronic low-grade neuroinflammation, the kind that simmers quietly below the threshold of obvious symptoms, is increasingly recognized by researchers as a significant contributor to cognitive decline over time. Anthocyanins help quiet inflammatory signaling pathways, creating a calmer biological environment for brain cells to carry out their repair and reorganization work through the night. Tart cherries also contain small amounts of tryptophan, the amino acid precursor to serotonin, which in turn supports the body's own production of melatonin. So you're not just providing melatonin directly through the cherries themselves, you're also giving the body what it needs to produce more of its own, reinforcing the effect from 2 directions simultaneously. For most older adults, a small glass of unsweetened tart cherry juice or a modest serving of frozen or dried tart cherries consumed about 1 to 2 hours before bedtime can gently but meaningfully support the depth of sleep that makes everything else possible. Now we've addressed 2 of the brain's most critical overnight needs, structure and sleep timing. But there's a third pillar that is just as important, and it's one that almost never gets the attention it deserves. The brain is not just a physical structure, it is a chemical communication system. It runs on specific molecules called neurotransmitters, messengers that carry signals from one brain cell to the next, and without these messengers, even perfectly maintained membranes and perfectly deep sleep cannot produce clear, reliable memory. The third food on our list is one that has been sitting in American kitchens for generations, misunderstood, unfairly avoided by many, quietly essential for all. That food is whole eggs, and specifically the yolk that so many people have been taught to discard.
If wild salmon provides structural fats, tart cherries support sleep, eggs supply something that is just as fundamental to memory, the raw material for the brain's most important chemical messenger. Inside your brain, communication between cells depends on neurotransmitters, and one of the most critical for memory, attention, and learning is acetylcholine. This particular neurotransmitter plays a central and irreplaceable role in the formation of new memories, in focused attention, and in the REM stage of sleep, when emotional processing and memory integration are most active. To produce acetylcholine, your body requires a nutrient called choline. And here's the part that genuinely surprises many of my patients when I share it with them. The majority of adults, including the majority of adults over 60, do not consume nearly enough choline on a daily basis. Choline is not a vitamin in the traditional sense, and it's not talked about anywhere near as often as it should be in conversations about brain health. Yet, without adequate choline, the brain simply cannot maintain the acetylcholine levels it needs to function at its best, to form new memories, to stay sharp and focused, to process and integrate experience during sleep. Egg yolks are one of the richest natural sources of highly bioavailable choline, particularly in the form of phosphatidylcholine, which integrates directly into cell membranes and actively supports neurotransmitter production. But the nutritional story of eggs does not stop there. They contain lutein and zeaxanthin, carotenoid compounds that most people associate only with eye health, but that are increasingly being studied for their meaningful role in cognitive performance. These compounds accumulate in brain tissue over time and appear to help protect neurons from oxidative damage. Egg yolks also provide vitamin D, a nutrient that a significant percentage of older adults are deficient in, particularly those who spend more time indoors, which is a perfectly reasonable description of most people's lives after retirement. Vitamin D receptors are found throughout the brain, including in the hippocampus, the region most centrally involved in the formation and retrieval of memories, and low levels of vitamin D have been associated in research with a meaningfully greater risk of cognitive decline. Additionally, eggs provide high-quality protein containing essential amino acids, including tryptophan, which complements and reinforces the sleep-supporting effects we discussed with tart cherries. 2 to 3 whole eggs per day, with at least one as part of the evening meal, can be a practical, affordable, and powerfully effective way to supply the brain with what it needs to communicate clearly and consolidate memories through the night.
That brings us to the fourth food on our list, one that works at a level even deeper than membrane structure or neurotransmitter supply. It works at the level of cellular energy itself, inside the tiny power plants that keep brain cells running through the night. That food is walnuts. If you have ever held a walnut and looked at it closely, you may have noticed something that almost feels intentional. It resembles a tiny brain. 2 distinct hemispheres, intricate folds and ridges that mirror the convolutions of cerebral tissue. While that resemblance is purely coincidental in terms of design, modern research has revealed that walnuts do in fact support brain function in ways that are meaningful and biologically specific. The reason begins deep inside your brain cells, in tiny structures called mitochondria, the power plants that keep brain cells running through the night. Your brain, despite representing only about 2% of your total body weight, consumes roughly 20% of your body's total energy. It is one of the most metabolically demanding organs in the entire human body, and it runs that demand around the clock, with the heaviest energy requirements concentrated precisely in the nighttime hours when repair and consolidation are most active. As we age, mitochondria become less efficient. They produce less energy per unit of input, and they generate more oxidative stress as a byproduct. When brain cells lack sufficient energy, everything downstream suffers. Memory consolidation becomes less thorough, repair processes slow down or halt entirely, neurotransmitter production becomes less consistent, the entire night shift operates at reduced capacity, not because the system broke down, but because the power flickered. Walnuts contain a compound called ellagic acid, which gut bacteria convert into substances known as urolithins, and these compounds have been studied for their role in supporting a process called mitophagy, essentially the cellular quality control system that clears out older, damaged mitochondrial components and supports healthier, more efficient energy production going forward. In simpler terms, the compounds in walnuts help the brain's power plants stay cleaner and work better over time. That is not a small thing. That is central to everything. But walnuts offer even more than mitochondrial support. They are rich in alpha-linolenic acid, a plant-based omega-3 fatty acid with meaningful anti-inflammatory properties, which complements the DHA from salmon by contributing to the reduction of inflammatory signaling throughout the brain. They contain a wide array of polyphenols, natural antioxidant compounds that help protect delicate brain tissue from the oxidative stress that accumulates during the very repair processes that are meant to protect it. Large observational studies have found consistent associations between regular walnut consumption and better cognitive performance in later life. While association does not establish direct cause, the biological mechanisms supporting these findings are compelling and well aligned with what we know about how the brain maintains itself. For most older adults, about 1 ounce of walnuts per day, roughly a small handful or about 14 walnut halves, is a reasonable and easy to maintain amount. They can be added to a salad, mixed into oatmeal, eaten alongside dinner, or enjoyed as a quiet evening snack. Simple, affordable, and biologically meaningful in ways that far exceed their humble appearance. And now we arrive at the 5th and final food on our list. In some ways, this one is the quietest of the 5. It is not flashy. It does not carry the reputation of a superfood trend. It will not make headlines or appear in a viral wellness post. But in terms of the breadth and depth of what it supports inside the brain, it may be the most foundational food of all. That food is dark leafy spinach. And to understand why it matters so profoundly, we need to talk about something that happens deep inside your brain cells every single night, a biochemical process called methylation. You do not need to memorize that word. What you need to understand is what it does. Methylation helps regulate gene expression. It supports DNA repair. It assists in neurotransmitter production. It plays a critical role in maintaining myelin, the protective insulation around nerve fibers that we discussed earlier. In short, methylation is part of the underlying operating system that allows every other repair and maintenance process in the brain to run properly. And methylation depends heavily on one specific nutrient, natural folate. Spinach is one of the richest food sources of natural folate available anywhere, and it's important to distinguish this from synthetic folic acid, the form found in many supplements and fortified packaged foods. Natural folate from whole foods is more easily recognized and utilized by the body, particularly in individuals who may have genetic variations, which are more common than most people realize, that makes synthetic forms of folate difficult to process efficiently. During sleep, when the brain ramps up its repair and regulatory activities, adequate folate supports those processes at the cellular level, providing the raw material for the molecular machinery that keeps everything running as it should. But spinach doesn't stop at folate. It's also naturally rich in dietary nitrates, compounds the body converts into nitric oxide, a molecule that relaxes blood vessels and improves blood flow throughout the body, and critically, into the brain. And blood flow matters enormously in this context because every nutrient we've discussed, the DHA from salmon, the choline from eggs, the antioxidants from walnuts, all of it must travel through blood vessels to reach brain tissue. If circulation is sluggish or compromised, even a diet rich in all the right nutrients cannot deliver them effectively to where they are most needed. As we age, blood vessels can become less flexible, less responsive, less efficient at delivering oxygen and nutrients where they are most needed. Supporting nitric oxide production through foods like spinach helps maintain the vascular health that makes nutrient delivery possible, particularly during the overnight repair window when the brain's demand for these resources is at its highest.
Spinach is also an excellent source of magnesium, a mineral involved in hundreds of enzymatic reactions throughout the body, including reactions that regulate the NMDA receptors involved in memory formation and that help support calm, stable sleep patterns throughout the night. Many older adults are quietly deficient in magnesium, particularly when their diets are low in leafy greens, and that deficiency can undermine sleep quality and memory consolidation in ways that are difficult to trace without understanding the underlying biology. Spinach also provides vitamin K, which is involved in the production of certain brain lipids important for cell membrane integrity, and vitamin E, a fat-soluble antioxidant that works to protect the delicate neuronal membranes that structural fats like DHA have helped build. About 1 cup of cooked spinach or 2 cups of fresh spinach consumed daily is a practical and achievable target. Lightly sautéing it in olive oil can enhance the absorption of fat-soluble nutrients, making each serving more effective than simply eating it raw. Now that we have explored each of these 5 foods individually, I want to take a moment to step back and look at the larger picture, because their real power is not simply additive, it's synergistic. Each one addresses a different pillar of the brain's overnight repair process, and when they come together, they reinforce one another in ways that no single food could accomplish alone. Wild salmon reinforces structure, providing the DHA that keeps brain cell membranes flexible and resilient, while B12 maintains the myelin insulation that keeps nerve signals clear and fast. Tart cherries regulate timing, supporting the melatonin production and deeper sleep stages that create the biological conditions under which repair can actually occur. Whole eggs provide choline, the raw material for acetylcholine, without which memory signals cannot travel clearly between cells. Walnuts sustain the cellular energy systems that power the entire repair process, preventing the metaphorical lights from dimming at the most critical hour. And spinach delivers the infrastructure support, the folate, the nitrates, the magnesium, the vitamins that allow circulation, genetic regulation, and mineral balance to function in ways that make everything else possible.
These 5 foods do not simply coexist on a dinner plate. They interact in biologically meaningful ways. The DHA from salmon integrates into cell membranes, while vitamin E from spinach protects those same membranes from oxidative stress. Choline from eggs works in tandem with folate from spinach in essential metabolic pathways that support neurotransmitter production. The melatonin support from tart cherries combines with the magnesium from spinach to promote deeper, more stable sleep architecture. And improved blood flow from dietary nitrates enhances the delivery of DHA, antioxidants, and all the other nutrients to brain tissue precisely during the hours when the brain needs them most. This is not a theory assembled from wishful thinking. It is a biologically coherent picture of how nutrition and sleep and brain repair interconnect in ways that are documented, measurable, and meaningful. Timing also plays a role that is easy to underestimate. Sleep does not unfold in a single uniform stage. It cycles through phases, and the first half of the night is dominated by deep, slow wave sleep, the stage most closely linked to metabolic waste clearance and the initial consolidation of memories from the day. Later in the night, REM sleep becomes more prominent, supporting emotional processing and the deeper integration of learned information. Because of this rhythm, consuming these key nutrients in the evening rather than scattered randomly throughout the day may better align with the brain's natural repair window. A dinner that includes wild salmon alongside cooked spinach provides structural fats, circulation support, magnesium, and folate before deep sleep begins. A small handful of walnuts with dinner or as an evening snack supports the cellular energy systems that will carry repair work through the night. Tart cherries taken 1 to 2 hours before bed gently support sleep onset and the depth of sleep that follows. This is not a complicated or rigid protocol. It is a thoughtful alignment of food with biology, a recognition that when you eat matters as much as what you eat. Before we talk about how all of this looks in real life, I want to spend a moment on the science that makes the entire conversation make sense, because understanding this one piece of biology will change the way you think about sleep forever.
During deep sleep, your brain activates a system that most people have never heard of, one of the most important protective mechanisms the brain has, the glymphatic system. You can think of it as the brain's internal plumbing network, a system of channels and fluid circulation designed for one specific purpose: cleaning. While you sleep, particularly during slow-wave deep sleep, the spaces between brain cells actually expand, in some studies by as much as 60%. That expansion allows cerebrospinal fluid to circulate more freely through brain tissue, washing away the metabolic waste that accumulated throughout the day. This process has been carefully documented in modern neuroscience research, and it is not subtle. It is one of the most active and critical biological events that occurs in the brain on a daily basis. Among the waste products cleared during this process is a protein fragment called beta amyloid. Now, it is critically important to understand this clearly. Everyone produces beta amyloid every day. It is a normal byproduct of brain activity, not a sign that something has gone wrong. The issue is not that it exists. The issue is whether it is being efficiently removed. When the glymphatic system slows down, which happens with aging and is dramatically worsened by fragmented or shallow sleep, beta amyloid can begin to accumulate over time, and long-term accumulation of this protein has been associated with the plaque formations seen in Alzheimer's disease. The problem is not production. The problem is clearance. And clearance depends on the quality and depth of sleep, which in turn depends on melatonin levels, on magnesium, on the absence of inflammatory disruption, on all of the biological factors that the 5 foods we have discussed directly support. This is why everything in this conversation is connected, and why no single piece of it can be safely ignored. Simultaneously, as the glymphatic system is doing its cleaning work, the brain is also performing memory consolidation. The hippocampus, the structure most deeply involved in forming new memories, essentially replays the experiences of the day, identifying what matters, strengthening the connections where learning occurred, and pruning away details that do not need to be retained. Short-term experiences are converted into long-term memories during this window. Synapses are adjusted and reinforced. This is how the brain learns, grows, and adapts even in later life. But both of these processes, waste removal and memory strengthening, require resources. They require energy from healthy, efficient mitochondria. They require flexible, intact cell membranes built from structural fats. They require protection from oxidative stress and the inflammatory signaling that can disrupt cellular function. They require the chemical messengers that depend on choline and folate and B12, and they require blood flow that actually delivers all of these resources to brain tissue at the moment of maximum need. In other words, the brain's night shift does not work in isolation. It works with what you provide. And what you eat before sleep is not nutritionally neutral. It is either supporting that process or failing to support it, and the difference accumulates over years. I want to share something with you now that stays with me years after it happened, because it captures in a very human and real way what all of this science actually means for a living person's life. A few years ago, I cared for a patient I will call Margaret. She was 72 years old, living entirely independently, managing her own finances, driving herself to all of her appointments, sharp and capable, and very, very proud of that independence. But she came to see me one afternoon with a quiet concern sitting just behind her eyes, and when I asked her what was on her mind, she leaned forward slightly and said, "Dr. Carter, I keep walking into a room and forgetting why I'm there. I'll open the refrigerator and just stand there, completely blank, staring, and it scares me." What worried her most, she told me, was not the forgetfulness itself, it was what she believed it meant. She was convinced, in that quiet, frightened way that so many of my patients share, that this was the beginning of something she would not be able to stop. We took a careful, methodical approach together. We reviewed her medications for anything that might be affecting cognition. We screened for mood changes because depression in older adults can present as cognitive symptoms. We checked her vitamin levels, including B12, and assessed her overall medical picture thoroughly. Nothing alarming appeared, but when we sat down and talked about her daily habits, and especially about her evenings, something stood out immediately. Dinner was often light and low in protein, sometimes just toast, sometimes just cereal. She had avoided eggs for years because she was still holding on to the fear of dietary cholesterol that had been so loudly communicated in decades past. Fish was rare, leafy greens were occasional at best. Sleep was fragmented, with frequent nighttime awakenings that left her feeling unrefreshed. In other words, her brain's night shift was showing up every single night, ready and willing to work, but it likely did not have consistent access to the structural fats, the choline, the antioxidants, the circulation support, and the deep sleep it needed to actually carry out the work it was designed to do. So instead of drastic interventions or intimidating protocols, we made simple, sustainable changes together. She began eating wild-caught salmon 2 or 3 times a week, most often as part of her dinner. She added sautéed spinach cooked in olive oil several evenings a week, which she found easy and genuinely enjoyable once she learned how to prepare it well. She stopped discarding egg yolks and began including whole eggs regularly, relieved to finally have permission to eat something she had always quietly loved. A small handful of walnuts became her regular evening snack, something she looked forward to rather than endured. And when her sleep felt especially light or fragmented, she incorporated a modest serving of unsweetened tart cherry juice about an hour before bed and noticed with some surprise that it seemed to help. We also worked gently on her sleep habits: consistent bedtime, less stimulating evening television, a calmer pre-sleep routine that respected what her body needed. Over the following months, Margaret did not experience a dramatic transformation. She did not wake up one morning feeling 20 years younger. That's not how biology works, and I would never promise that to anyone. But she did notice fewer of those blank, frightening moments. Her recall felt steadier. Mornings felt clearer. She described it as less mental fog, a phrase I hear often from patients who have made these kinds of consistent, aligned changes. She felt less anxious, more confident in her own mind, more like herself. Was it only the food? Of course not. Brain health is shaped by many factors: physical movement, social connection, cardiovascular health, stress levels, sleep consistency. All of it matters. But aligning her evening nutrition with her brain's natural repair cycle appeared to meaningfully remove barriers that had been quietly working against her every night. Margaret's story is not about reversing aging, it's about supporting biology. And for many older adults, that support, practical and consistent and grounded in how the brain actually functions, can make a difference that is felt in daily life in ways that matter enormously. As we come to the end of this conversation, I want to speak to you directly, with the kind of honesty that I try to bring to every patient I care for. After more than 20 years in this field, I know that the greatest fear many people carry as they get older is not heart disease, not arthritis, not even cancer. It's memory. It's the quiet, ever-present worry that one day something essential about who they are will begin to slip away, that they will lose themselves slowly and be unable to stop it. If you are over 60 and you've had moments of forgetfulness, if you have stood in a doorway and felt that hollow pause, if you have lost a word mid-sentence or blanked on a name you know perfectly well, I want you to hear this clearly. Aging does bring changes, but decline